Tell me about the moment that we saw where it seemed like you were almost arguing with the crowd or debating with the crowd at one point. What was that about?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Do you know how much money it costs to get a ticket down below?
How much?
I read that it costs $1,750. So to get a ticket to the debate, you had to be fairly wealthy. Most working people that I know don't spend $1,700 to get a ticket to a debate, and that's problematic. But, people, that's what the DNC did. But at the end of the day, I felt very good about the debate because I think, my opponents raised a whole lot of issues, and I think we were able to fight back effectively. I'm still standing. And I'm looking forward to the South Carolina primary on Saturday and Super Tuesday on Tuesday.
So what you just heard there was Bernie Sanders after last night's debate in South Carolina being asked why the crowd was more hostile to him than usual. And he made a great point that tickets for that event cost anywhere from $1,750 up to $3,200. And that really does typify what last night was. A concerted effort by all the people on the stage and the moderators and the DNC to try to slow Bernie Sanders down. And despite all that, they failed. Bernie Sanders still had a fantastic debate. Again, the crowd was not representative of the average South Carolinian or the average American. Tickets for that event cost $1,700 and more, and a lot of neoliberals, a lot of defenders of the DNC are pushing back against this fact by saying that not all the tickets were sold, that some of the tickets were given away for this event, that some of the tickets were allocated to different campaigns. And I don't doubt that that's somewhat true, but at the end of the day, a significant portion of tickets were sold for this event, and those tickets cost $1,700 and more, which to me means that a good chunk of the audience was only there because they are wealthy or at least very well off. And that's not representative of the social and political and economic vision Bernie Sanders wants to build. So there was an effort by the DNC in some ways to put forward this idea that the crowd was against Bernie, that this crowd, which supposedly was filled with regular people, was booing Bernie Sanders, was scoffing at Bernie Sanders, when that does not reflect the reality of actual Americans. And we have some data to back this up. CBS, the network that hosted the debate, did a flash poll last night, right after the debate was done, asking people who they know watched the debate what they thought of the debate. And they asked them, who impressed you the most? And Bernie Sanders won on that question. If you look at the numbers, Bernie Sanders impressed 45% of those watching, Joe Biden 43%, Warren 40%, Buttigieg 38%, Klobuchar 31%, Bloomberg 25%, Steyer 24%. What you'll notice there is that people could answer more than once, which is why this number adds up to more than 100, because you might have been impressed by both Bernie and Warren, or whatever combination. The point is that while the room was clearly stacked against Bernie, while most of the attacks, not all of them, but most of the attacks were launched at Bernie from everyone on the field, from Warren to Bloomberg, and while the moderator questions were often framed in a way to attack Bernie Sanders or to give other people an avenue to attack Bernie Sanders, or in some cases, softball questions to some of the other candidates to make them look better in comparison to Bernie Sanders, it didn't work. It just didn't work. Bernie Sanders came out when they asked regular people as the winner of this debate, and it shows the strength of Bernie Sanders. This wasn't Bernie's best debate. Bernie Sanders has had better debates. He's had better debates in terms of cutting through the BS and delivering his message. He's had better debates at being able to explain his complex policies in a clear and concise manner. There's been times in this debate where Bernie Sanders wasn't as sharp as he has always been. But that's fine, because no one bats 1,000. No one is perfect. No one hits it out of the park every night. Bernie Sanders, despite all the disadvantages in this particular debate, the moderators, everyone against him on the stage, a crowd full of people who can pay $1,700 to $3,200 to sit in the room to boo Bernie Sanders. he still comes out the front runner. No one else on that stage tonight could make a coherent vision, in my view, about why Bernie Sanders would be a bad nominee or why they would be the better alternative to Bernie Sanders. The attacks didn't work. How is Bernie going to pay for it? Bernie cited studies noting that Medicare for all is more than paid for under Bernie Sanders' vision. Bernie Sanders was attacked on comments about Cuba, but at the end of the day, Bernie was 100% right, even as Buttigieg and Biden lied about it, that all Bernie Sanders said is basically what Barack Obama said, which is that Cuba has accomplished wonderful things despite many challenges, even if there's much to criticize about the Cuban regime. Bernie Sanders and Obama actually agreed on that one. Everything they had against Bernie, it just didn't work. None of it worked. Bernie Sanders, at various points in this debate, was getting a little heated because he was being attacked, which is fine. The frontrunner gets attacked, but he was being attacked unfairly at times by the moderators, the audience, and his fellow contestants. Nonetheless, when he centered himself and he looked in the camera and he talked to the millions of working class people watching this who couldn't afford $1,700 to watch it in the room, what he said was, I am here to build a social and political and economic vision centered on equality and dignity and compassion for everyone. And when I do that, lives in America will be better for everyone, for the diverse working class, for people regardless of their orientation or their race or their citizenship status or any of those factors. Bernie Sanders is building a society for everyone. And when he did that, all of the BS, all of the chirping, all of the tilted field went away. And I think that's what people really engaged with. They saw Bernie in that moment and they really liked him. Bernie Sanders was maybe not as sharp as he's always been, but he was still Bernie Sanders tonight. The man that millions of working class people trust more than anyone else to develop and deliver a vision of equality and dignity and compassion and opportunity for everyone. That's why he impressed most people tonight, more than anyone else. Other people had decent debates. Again, I think Warren and Biden both had decent debates, and that's why they were close to Bernie on this particular question. But no one in my mind really did enough to change the nature of the race. And so there's a lot of questions about how this debate might affect the next stage in the primary process. And I'm not sure it did. If we look at the polling, Joe Biden has a narrow lead over Bernie in South Carolina, according to the polling averages. He has a lead, but it's not a gargantuan one. It's not the sort of lead that is insurmountable. If Joe Biden does win South Carolina by a decent amount, it could give him some momentum. But if it's a close result in South Carolina, I think it's incumbent upon Bernie folks to let people know that that's still a win for Bernie Sanders. Because ultimately, Joe Biden was 30 points up a few months ago in this particular state. But he's lost his lead here, especially with African Americans. His support is crumbling. Bernie beats Biden among African Americans nationally in two recent, national polls. And with all of that in mind, if Joe Biden only ends up winning South Carolina, his quote-unquote firewall by 2 or 3 or 4 points, then that's a win for Bernie Sanders. And I don't think that's going to shift any narratives about the fact that Bernie Sanders is undeniably the person best poised to represent the party going forward, and that he's the best poised to win the lion's share of delegates on Super Tuesday, which is just 6 days away now. Bernie Sanders is the frontrunner. He was attacked as the frontrunner, but those attacks were often unfair. It wasn't just, he's the frontrunner, give him more scrutiny. It was, let's stack the audience, let's stack the moderation, let's allow people to get away with attacking him based on conjecture and lies and speculation. Nonetheless, he emerged as the frontrunner still. And I think that ultimately what this is showing is that the Democratic Party needs to start practicing what it has been preaching for so long. which is that there needs to be a unity candidate that comes out of this race. And the whole narrative before Bernie became the undisputed leader was that we should not attack the frontrunners because you never know who the actual nominee is going to be. And you want that person to be strong and everyone to be behind them. And you don't want to have them already damaged when it goes to the general election. But now that Bernie Sanders is the leader, all the quote-unquote vote blue no matter who types, all the quote-unquote don't attack the frontrunner, build unity types have sort of disappeared. Maybe it's a coincidence, but rather I think it's that Bernie Sanders is a threat to those people who have tried to build a false sense of solidarity and unity, and now it's coming back to bite them in the behind while Bernie Sanders is the leader. Bernie Sanders is the most popular person in the race. He has the largest coalition of people. He has the largest potential base of voters, people considering voting for Bernie Sanders. He has very high favorability ratings. He has the greatest potential to build a coalition, not just of white voters or black voters, but of white voters, black voters, Hispanic voters, Asian American voters, Native American voters, more than anyone else in this field. Bernie Sanders is the frontrunner. Bernie Sanders won last night's debate. Despite everything they threw at him, when you speak to regular working class people about the stuff regular working class people care about and have concerns about, you will win.